Can you believe that? They based their movie watching decisions on a website. What's up, Ragin Nation? How's it going? This is Alex, and you're watching The Road to TF5. This is Webster's. We're talking about Transformers last night. This is episode number 194, and this is going to be a fun episode because what we're going to do in this episode is predict the Rotten Tomatoes score for Transformers last night and also the box office. Now, why should we really talk about this? Well, first of all, for me, it's fun to talk about, but it really doesn't affect us. Does it affect us directly? No, it doesn't. Does it affect us indirectly? Well, maybe, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't affect us. For Rotten Tomatoes, it's a website that a lot of people use, and if it ends up getting a low score, like a low crappy score, then people might not end up watching it. Can you believe that? They base their movie watching decisions on a website. Is that not sad? They cannot make a decision on their own. But that's the reality of things. That's how this website works. And unfortunately, if there's a low score, it can affect the box office, because if fewer people want to watch it because of that score, then that means the box office take is going to be lower, and in the end, the studios, by studio I mean Paramount Pictures, they end up getting a lower return on investment. They invested a lot of money into this movie. They are here to make money. This is a business at the end of the day, and they want to make sure that their investment of potentially, I don't know, 400 million in production and marketing costs combined end up giving back, I would say, at least double. They want to see at least double back. They want to see the same type of results that they got in the previous two films, which is $1.1 billion, because they know that this is a big brand for them. Probably their biggest brand for Paramount Pictures. Anyways, that's what we're here to talk about, and it's gonna be fun. We're gonna make a couple of predictions, and then I'd like you guys to make predictions. But before we do any of that, I think we should actually look back at the history of how these films, the previous films, have done, both in Rotten Tomatoes and also in the box office. So let's just go back in time and look at the last 10 years. And we're going to start off with Transformers. It's got 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. And the truth is that not a lot of people knew what to expect. They went into this film because they were fans, and a lot of the non-fans went into this film because this is something new. So I think a lot of people ended up enjoying it. 57% is still quite high, not a fresh tomato, but still quite high. And really, I think the main people that didn't like this film were the really hardcore G1 fans, or just Transformers fans that didn't, they had certain expectations. And as well, there were critics that really just didn't like Michael Bay, and they're just nitpicking. So at the end of the day, 57% is a high score. And most of the people, at least half of the people, really, really liked it. So this ended up being a good movie. Move on to 2009, we have Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, 19%. A very low score. As for my opinion of it, I thought the movie was a complete mess. Just because, well, it went from high school drama to big robot battle in the forest to military recruitment commercial to a really rushed boss fight. And it just had a very, very incohesive story. And at the end of the day, people not only just want to be entertained, but they want to have a good story. A story where they can connect with the characters. And Transformers Revenge of the Fallen didn't give us that. Of course, there was the writer's strike, and I do put a lot of the blame on that. Unfortunately, it did end up affecting the film and people's enjoyment of it, and it just wasn't the film that a lot of fans wanted. Move on to 2011, Transformers Dark of the Moon, 35%, quite an increase from the previous films, 19%, 35%. How did they do it? Well, I think they ended up doing a lot of great things. First of all, there are higher stakes, bringing in more of Transformers lore, having a much, much better villain, and twists and turns in this movie. And of course, that Chicago battle, really, really exciting. It was a pretty long movie, and I think a lot of people also really appreciated the fact that this was actually good 3D. 3D that was on the level of Avatar, which was quite amazing. So that as an overall experience was a positive thing, but still not quite as high as the first film, which gave us 57%, but still quite an improvement from Revenge of the Fallen. Now fast forward to 2014, which was 3 years ago, with Transformers Age of Extinction, 18%. That's even lower than Revenge of the Fallen. And I think that Michael Bay, with him knowing that this could potentially be his last film, he just wanted to go with a bang and just give us everything but the kitchen sink. He gave us Dinobots, but at the end of it all, with all these characters, there were a lot of really empty moments. It was all very exciting, but for example, when they brought in the Dinobots, they were just background characters. And then as for the villains, besides Lockdown, all those KSI guys were, I mean, those prototypes were really just like nameless Decepticons, which is something that I'm actually kind of tired of seeing. But at the end of it all, the movie was just too long. 2 hours and 45 minutes. For a lot of casual moviegoers, it was exhausting. And I just watched it recently, and I just felt that this movie's too long. This movie is just like, a lot of it can be trimmed off. And there's just a lot of characters that I don't really connect with. For example, Shane and Tessa, and even Cade Yeager, who as an inventor doesn't do a whole lot of inventing in this movie. He's just a character that is very, very flat. So unfortunately, there are a lot of weak points in it, but besides all the nasty things that I say about this movie, which really isn't that nasty, to be completely honest, all the low marks and flaws that I say about these films, I still love them. Why? Because they're exciting to me. I grew up with the cartoons, and seeing these Transformers, these larger-than-life robotic characters appear at me in 3D on a giant screen, I love it. I don't really care about what the critics say. I don't care that these films are flawed. I just love what I see, and I get so excited. I get goosebumps, and that's all that matters to me. So at the end of the day, Rotten Tomatoes scores shouldn't matter to you. Really, it shouldn't. You either make a decision now, you want to watch it, or you don't. And I want to watch it. I want to watch the hell out of this film. And I'm going to watch it more and more times. And the more people watch it, it contributes to the box office, which leads us to talk about the box office. So here we go. We're going to start off with domestic box office. Transformers opened with 70 million and ended up with 320. Revenge of the Fallen opened with 108 million and ended up with what ended up being the highest domestic box office take, 402 million. Transformers Dark of the Moon opened a little bit lower, slightly lower, at 98 million, but ended up making 352 million at the domestic box office. And Age of Extinction opened at 100 million, which is very consistent with the last two sequels, but ended up taking the lowest, the absolute lowest of the rest of them, and that is $245 million less at the domestic box office. That is a whole $100+ million less than Transformers Dark of the Moon. What went wrong? And another thing is, how did Revenge of the Fallen, which in my opinion the worst of the Transformers live action franchise, ended up making 400 million? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because Michael Bay made the promise of making a better film by adding more robots. And people believe that. It opened huge, and it also ended up making more money just because, well, it was a film that a lot of people ended up watching several times because of all the robot action that they just wanted to see. A lot of fans gave it repeat viewings, but when you really look back at it, it's really not that great of a film. And then it started, I think a lot of people started feeling that fatigue. A lot of the fans and also general moviegoers ended up feeling that fatigue because these are long movies, and these are essentially the same style of storytelling. Set up, big action sequence at the very, very end. It is exhausting. And that's why we go from 320 to 400 to 350 to 245. $245 million. That is significantly lower than what Revenge of the Fallen made. And they're equally as, almost equally as just not as good. You know what I'm saying? I really enjoyed the heck out of Age of Extinction. It was very, very entertaining, but when you look at it from a story standpoint as a film, it's really not that great. But we're not here to talk about the quality of the film. We're here to talk about box office. So let's talk about what we can expect to see for Transformers: The Last Knight. Now, based on this this article from Deadline Hollywood, they're predicting that Transformers: Last Knight. I'll just read you the quote here. Paramount's upcoming Transformers: Last Knight isn't expected to do the domestic box office any favors, with the series' lowest opening yet of $70 million over 5 days. That's $70 million in 5 days. That's the same as the first film. How did you go from 70 to 108 back to 70? What is going on here? What are they doing wrong? Why can't this film open higher? The crazy thing is that these are from box office analysts, and they're almost always right. It's the studio executives that are the ones that are always predict wrong. I mean, they predicted Wonder Woman at 65, but it ended up making over $100 million on the opening weekend. But box office analysts, I mean, they know what they're talking about, and if they say 70 million, like that is a pretty like ridiculous number. Well, you know, that tells us something. I mean, that really tells us something significant, and that is Paramount needs to rely on the international box office. Because if you look at these numbers right here, Transformers 710, Revenge of the Fallen 836, Age of Extinction 1.1 billion, and Dark of the Moon $1.1 billion. It has consistently made $1.1 billion in the last 2 sequels. Now, how are they doing that? How on earth are they making that kind of money? Well, it has a lot to do with China, actually, because, well, if you didn't already notice, if you're watching some films out there, you will notice that there are Chinese film companies that are the Chinese film company logos that are appearing in front of the movie, like in the opening credits. For example, China Film Group, Shanghai Film Group, Huahua Media, STX Entertainment. You know, these are companies that are these are these Chinese companies investing into Hollywood films. I mean, they invested in technology, they invested in real estate. Now they want something more to invest in, and that is Hollywood films. So, this brings me to talk about another film franchise, Fast and Furious franchise. Fast and Furious franchise are mindless action movies. Completely mindless action movies. I like to put Michael Bay's Transformers films in this category. And why am I putting it in this category, and how is it related to China? Well, China's universal language in film is action. Since the beginning of filmmaking in China, their language has always been action. Look at these Jackie Chan movies. Look at these Chow Yun-fat movies. Look at John Woo movies. The reason why these films are one of the most celebrated films in Chinese cinema is because of action. If you look at a Jackie Chan film, he spends like 3 to 4 months choreographing and planning the action and filming it. They only spend 2 weeks really on the dialogue and the drama scenes, because that is their language. And action speaks to them. That's why Fast and Furious 7, Furious 7, and The Fate of the Furious have done serious bank at the Chinese box office. Let's look at this. Furious 7, $1.1 billion $1.5 billion worldwide, with China bringing in $390 million at just the Chinese box office, okay? The Fate of the Furious, $1.2 billion worldwide. China box office, $391 million. That is insane. Now let's look at what Transformers has done in the past. I'm going to go with Transformers Dark of the Moon, because that's when they started really tapping into the Chinese box office. And they made $165 million just from China alone. Not bad. But Age of Extinction, now that is a significant jump. Double that. $320 million from China for Age of Extinction. That's a pretty big deal. Not quite up there with Fast and Furious, but still pretty high. Now, I'll tell you why it's not up there with Fast and Furious, is because Transformers has a fan base, like a built-in fan base, and sometimes you just gotta think about the fact that people are either fans or they're not. Fate of the Furious, you don't even need to be a fan of it. It was just created on its own. It's suddenly just a very random action film with random characters and random stories, and it's all very, like, you just need to go into it. it doesn't worry about what happened in the past films. It doesn't do that. You just have to go right into it. As for the Transformers films, you do need to know a little bit of backstory, otherwise it you might not get it. It's kind of like Star Wars. So for the Chinese box office, could they expect to do better than Age of Extinction or worse? Well, based on this article from Variety, it actually announces, or actually gives us some more information about which companies are investing in Transformers Last Night from China. First of all, there's the Weiying Technology Group, there's Shanghai Film Group, and there's also Huahua Media. This is a Shanghai Film Group and Huahua Media are actually these companies that have invested in a lot of Hollywood films. You will have seen their logos at the opening credits of a lot of Hollywood films. But these are companies that actually haven't worked with Paramount in the previous Transformers films. In the previous, in Age of Extinction, it was China Movie Channel, China Film Group, China Film Co-Production Corporation, Huaxia Film Distribution, and a whole lot of other third-party companies that provided product placement into the film. And you'll notice a lot of that when you watch Transformers Age of Extinction. But now they're going with a lot of other companies, such as the ones that I've mentioned. So that is who they're going with. And that gives us a better idea of what can we expect to see from the Chinese box office. Now, an interesting thing is based on box office analysts, the expectation for the Chinese box office is actually a little bit lower than that of Age of Extinction. They're predicting $290 million from China. Now, I'm wondering, why should it go lower? I'm really not sure why it would go lower. But I think it might have a little bit to do with the fact that the film doesn't take place in China. It's not filmed in China at all. As far as I know, it's not filmed in any part of Asia. It's mostly filmed in Europe. And as far as I also know, they don't have any big Chinese stars in this film. They don't have Li Bingbing. They don't have the Chinese boxer in that. They also don't have that Chinese pop star who was in the movie. So, and a bunch of Hong Kong stars. They don't even have that. So that would, of course, lend to the fact that it could do a lower box office. So all these little contributing factors will affect it. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is this Forbes article, which has a headline. It says, "We should be box office. We should be rooting for Transformers Last Night." And this is a very extensive article, and it's a very, very important article. And that the reason why is that, yes, we really should be rooting for Transformers Last Night. And the main reason why is because this affects Paramount directly. Paramount hasn't had a big hit for a long time. Triple X was not a hit. I mean, The Return of Xander Cage. Ghost in the Shell was not a hit. And a lot of their other films were not hits. You know what I'm saying? So Transformers Last Night needs to be a hit for Paramount Pictures. And the main reason why is if Transformers Last Night is not a hit, then we might expect Paramount to be a little bit more cautious and a little bit more conservative in their spending. And what I mean by that is like future big budget films, if they even end up being big budget, mega budget films, might not be as mega as we would have known. You know what I'm saying? They would end up being much less, and they would end up spending more conservatively on their future Transformers films. That's why this film needs to do well. And that's why this film needs to do well at the box office, because it will affect the future of their company and the decisions they're going to make and the direction that they're going to take this franchise into. Because we don't know what goes beyond this animated prequel. They're playing it safe by making it an animated prequel, and the budgets for these films are not going to be anywhere near as close to the $200 million mega budget sequels that Michael Bay has made. And that's why they're treading softly. They're walking on thin ice here. They're gonna make the really safe moves with these future films, and hopefully they can bring it back to that large scale that Michael Bay gave us in the last 5 films. Anyways, here are my predictions. It's time to get into the predictions, okay? Rotten Tomatoes score, 29%. I think it's going to be better than Revenge of the Fallen, better than Age of Extinction, but not as good as Dark of the Moon. I think the fact that we have good writers is going to contribute to a better story, a better film overall, but the fact is that a lot of people are really exhausted. A lot of people have given up on this franchise. A lot of critics are out there targeting Michael Bay. And because of that, no matter how good this film ends up being, they will still have made up their mind that they will believe that this film is good. They will have convinced themselves that this is going to be a bad movie. So I'm going to go with 29%. Okay? As for box office, it's going to, well, they say it's going to open with $70 million. I'm going to be a little bit more, I'm going to give it more benefit. I'm going to say it's going to open with $80 million, and I'm going to say that's going to end at 190 domestically. 190 domestically is quite a significant drop from 245, and it's going to make, let's say, a billion point 02. So that's $1 billion plus 20 million. $1,020 million, okay? Worldwide. That's worldwide, and I have no clue what it's going to make from China, but they're predicting $290 million. So there you have it. There's my predictions. 29% Rotten Tomatoes, opening with 80 domestically, ending with 190 domestically, and ending with $1 billion and 20 million worldwide. What are your predictions? Let me know in the comment section below, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. I talked a lot about box office, okay, but I just love talking about it. The reason why I like to talk about it, and the reason why the way I feel about the way I feel is because rooting for Transformers or any movie is like rooting for your favorite sports team. It's exactly like that. I root for my city's hockey team, just like the way I root for Transformers doing well. I want them to do well because I want to see them do more, make more films in the future. I want them to do well because that is an indication of what to expect for the future. And I hope we see more for the future. Anyways, let me know your prediction in the comment section below. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode and you want to see more, hit that like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like me on Facebook, The Ragin Nation. Also follow me on Twitter, Ragin Nation. My name is Alex. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace! And I was thinking, okay, I'm done. I don't want to see any more because they just showed us a confirmed death of Decepticon. And they do that. They ruined the experience sometimes.